Okay. We are ready to start, and I'm going to lap over like I nearly always do, the last paragraph of chapter 16 and into the chapter 17, which will introduce a new minor section. Okay. We're dealing with bowls of wrath. And you remember that the idea of the bowls of wrath are the judgments that God sends upon the unbelieving world that are final. Now, I don't mean the last judgment, but I mean for the people involved, they are final. And I want to keep some of the principles that we have established in mind. That remember, judgments that kill are final. I had a doctor friend one time who emphasized this. He said, so the mortality rate of that medical procedure is only 1%. But the people in that 1% are 100% dead. So that's the idea that I'm trying to get over here. And notice, whether or not it's a final or whether it's a warning depends not on the event itself, but on the spiritual condition of the person who dies. You're going to begin to believe this, that it is a blessing for one who belongs to God to die, because it's going home. It's going to be with Him. It is what we ought to long for, but like Augustine, when his mother kept telling him he ought to repent and stop his licentious ways, he says, I will, but not yet. And so that's the attitude we have. That's the reason I keep emphasizing that, because it goes contrary to our human nature to think that way. And I have learned something, that if you're going contrary to human nature, you've got to really hammer at it to get it to become a living part of our faith. And so I don't make any apology for repeating things. If I get one of you to believe that every time I repeat it, then I'd only have to repeat it 16 or 17 times to get everybody done, okay? So this is the final judgment. The seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air. Now, think about this. The word air here is not, it's an anachronism, really. The ancient peoples did not know that there was such a thing as air. They only knew that there was wind. Now, bear with me, that's true. But if I were, and I don't know, I may go back and translate it, this is in the atmosphere. Think about that. If something comes to you in the air you breathe, that's general and final. You know? And that's the idea. Out of the temple, a loud voice from the throne saying, "It is done." This almost echoes Jesus on the cross. Yeah. It is finished. That's the reason I'm calling this the final judgment, the final bowl of wrath. We've heard everything. Going back to Ecclesiastes, where he says, this is the end of the matter. We have looked at everything, and this is what is true. fear God and keep His commandments. For that's what it means to be a human being. That's what we're here for. Okay, it's in that kind of...
I got a question when you're ready, Charlie.
Okay.
It says, came out of the temple. The temple was torn down when this revelation was written.
Yes, but this is the word naos, the sanctuary, that, and it is the sanctuary that the writer of Hebrews says is in heaven.
Okay.
Okay? Remember, since this is a vision, it doesn't have to be in existence.
That's why I asked the question.
Okay, yeah. Good.
Whose voice is this? Is it not the Father
Whose
or
voice?
not the Son?
I don't know. I've already said there's some things I don't know, and I don't know. Since it says from the throne, no, that won't work either. I started to say because the Lamb is beside the throne, and in some sense on the throne. And so let's just take it as I know how I translated it, that a heavenly voice said. I hedge my bets sometimes. Okay? So that gets as much as I know. I wish I could answer your question, but I can't. I had a friend who is now head of the, well, he's not now, but he recently retired as head of the Graduate School of Bible in Abilene Christian University, James Thompson. He's just editor of the Restoration Quarterly. I think that's about all he's doing, teaching a few classes. And he came to the church where I was preaching in Beaumont, and somebody asked him a question, and he told that it was an adult class, and he said, "You can't ask that question." He said, "What do you mean I can't ask that question? I just did." He said, "What I mean is, you can ask it, but you can't get an answer because the revelation of God doesn't give you that answer." And we need to have humility. We get in more trouble, we human beings, by asking questions for which God hasn't chosen to give us the answer. You know, a 4-year-old can ask questions.
And often do.
Yes, that the wisest of people. I remember I wrote one of my prose poems as an introductory poem for my book, The Eighth Day. And I point out, you know, you have all of these scientific theories and everything explaining everything, but it's like building a castle of sand on the beach or a house of cards, because a 4-year-old can come along and demolish our theories by simply asking why. And we'd like to know. And there's nothing wrong with being curious. God made us to be curious people. It's part of being in His image and being over in charge of all the works of His hands, all the creation. But some of the answers are just not there.
I have another question.
Okay.
What about the earthquake? Is that an earthquake catastrophically through the whole earth?
Yes. I'm going to get to that. Okay, he said, there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake. Now, this is a literary convention, biblical literary convention. You go back to Sinai, and what did you have? Rumbles, earthquakes, flashes of lightning. You need Cecil B. DeMille to do this right. If you haven't seen the Ten Commandments, he does a bang-up job of this. But and every place where God's in contact with the earth, as it were, He is so powerful that where he contacts his physical creation, the creation is shaken. Does that make sense to you? It's shaken, and flashes of lightning and rumbles of thunder.
This also happens at the time of the death of Christ.
Yes,
The same type of thing happens.
a great earthquake.
Right.
See, that was, God was taking his son under his wing. He had forsaken him so that he had the full punishment of sin upon him, but now he came to receive him.
So the earthquake leveled everything,
Yes,
and then the only thing that's left is Mount Sinai. That would be the highest peak left?
I don't know. Don't get too literal with these visions. Let's say, okay, no earthquake like it has ever occurred since man has been on earth. Now, you see, he wants to. The great city split into three parts, and the cities of the nations collapsed. The great cities are the cities of the world, not Jerusalem, but the cities of the world. Maybe, and it would include physical Jerusalem. And think about an earthquake that would take the big cities of the world and split them into three pieces. It's total. It's total. I write in my own mind some science fiction. It's kind of my relaxation. And I had a scene where to destroy a whole wicked planet, somebody got a moon from another planet and made it go nearly the speed of light and hit that planet. And in my mind, I saw that planet breaking up at where the tectonic plates come together, just blowing. Have you ever seen one of the National Geographic things on television about if we had the great volcano that's under the Yellowstone National Park ever blew up? They show pictures like that where we're at the plates, the edge of the plates that comes up. And I'm just telling you from physical science what I know that could be like this. I'm not saying, I hope I'm long gone before it happens. I intend to be.
Charles, one more question.
Okay.
The great city split into three parts. One city.
Well,
And the cities of the nation collapsed.
wait.
Oh, wait, okay.
This is, remember that seventh of anything, whether it's seals or trumpets, is the final destruction leading into the next minor section. We'll see what the great city is, okay?
Okay.
All right. The great city split into three parts, and the cities of the nations collapsed. God remembered Babylon the Great. You see? That answers your question. Babylon the Great, and gave her the cup filled with the wine of the fury of his wrath. This is like a great drunken woman who is drunk, and we'll see in greater detail in the next minor section. Every island fled away, and the mountains could not be seen. From the sky, huge hailstones of about 100 pounds each. It was my misfortune to stand on a porch at 5345 Worth Drive in East Dallas, near east side of Dallas, when hailstones that big around were falling. They weighed about 7 or 8 ounces. 100-pound hailstone would leave nothing. It took my 2004 Camry and totaled it. Not any damage that kept it from running, but when the insurance adjuster took one look at it, he said total. He wouldn't even think about trying to repair it. It broke out windows. It literally knocked one of the outside mirrors off and down on the ground. It didn't break either the windshield or the rear view mirror, the rear window. I don't know why. Cars sitting in the same, but close to it, it did both. And so 100-pound hail, you don't want to be. That's the final hailstorm. You see, again, the final thing. Okay, every island fled away. If the earth is torn to pieces, the islands will flee. Can you see that? And they cursed God on account of the plague of hail, because the plague was so terrible. Now, this is leading up at this end of this minor section. That's a description of the final judgment. Every one of the minor sections end up with the final judgment. Now, we go back in the parallel section. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came to me. Come, and I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute, who sits on many waters. With her the kings of earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert. There I saw a woman, now, into a desert. What does the word desert mean to you? What?
Barren, dry. Barren and dry.
Barren and dry.
Desolate.
Desolate. Actually, if you look at it, it means an uninhabited place. Because most people think of deserts as being hot, but the Kalahari Desert is cold. It's because it's where the Antarctic current comes up on the Atlantic side of the African coast, and it's cold. It is really cold there. I've been in the edge of it, and it's cold. But so you have that kind of, but it's a desert place. But where would Israel look for a desert? What direction?
East.
What?
East.
East. Who said that? Okay. Yes, to the east. And that what is to the east? What's the other side of the desert?
Jordan?
What?
Jordan? Is Jordan to the east?
No, Jordan is still in the Jordan River Valley, mainly.
Babylon.
What?
Babylon.
Babylon.
Talking about
Nineveh, the Assyrians, the Sumerians, the Iraqis, that whole constellation. See, I tell you that the literary background of the book of Revelation is the whole Bible. It uses the resources of the whole Bible to teach what God wants taught. There I saw, see that carried away in the Spirit? That is again the sign that he has an altered state of consciousness. That is, he saw a vision. He was not in his normal way of perceiving. He didn't see actual things. He saw what the Spirit wanted him to see. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names. What's blasphemy?
Claiming to be God, or
Well, that is blasphemous.
Derision of God.
What?
The derision of God.
That's not a bad term. It is putting God down. It is attributing bad things to Him. It is mocking Him. There's a lot of equivalent phrases there. So this woman, she's sitting on what? What kind? Who is the beast?
Satan.
What?
Satan.
Satan, the devil. This has been described before. The red beast, you know, with the 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, look at the description of the woman. This woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. She had a golden cup in her hand filled with the abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This title was written on her forehead. Wouldn't it be great if bad people had their badness written on their forehead? You don't think so?
Would that include us?
No. If we are genuine believers, we have the name of Christ written on
Oh, that's
ours.
a good point. I'm glad.
But for the sake of division, John needs to know. So it's written on their forehead. Don't go to any esoteric links to try to make some kind of psychological or meaning for that. It just means that for the purposes of God here in this vision, they're labeled. You can tell. Mystery. Now, the word mystery, what does that mean to you?
Not known.
Not known. Or we usually think of it as mysterious or threatening or foreboding.
Something that needs to be revealed.
What?
Something that needs to be revealed.
Well, in the context of the time, the first century, BC and AD and along in there, they would immediately associate this with the mystery religions. That is, religions that promised eternal life. And actually, in the New Testament, if it says the mystery of Christ, it means something that had been hidden but was now being made known. And that's the way I translate every occurrence of it in the New Testament. Because that is what it would mean to the people that were alive then. So this woman, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. Now, goes ahead to say, I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, those belonging to Christ, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. Now, since the Reformation, it's been quite common to identify this woman as an apostate church, if not the apostate church. I think that's completely wrong. I'll tell you why. She is not called an adulteress, but a whore, a prostitute. And prostitute is something that allures God's people away from their commitment to God. This is worldliness. We don't hear much preaching about worldliness anymore in the church, but When I was growing up, I mean, you knew what worldliness meant.
The
Huh?
Proverbs seem to use that contrast between the prostitute and the woman of wisdom.
Yes,
That
yes.
contrast is there.
Yes, it does. Yep, you're right.
What's worldliness? Give us your definition.
Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. Preacher was up preaching, and he said, "Don't be worldly. That's committing adultery." The old woman out in the congregation says, "Oh, amen. Preach on, preacher." He said, "That's drinking." "Oh, amen. Preach on, preacher." And he ended up by saying, "Snuff dipping." He said, "Now, preacher, you done stopped preaching and gone to meddling." And too often, that's what the way we view world. Worldliness means the allure of the world, the things that tempt us. John talks about them in 1 John 2, where he says it's the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life, that being want to be like other people, live it to the full.
The
And-
instance of temptations in the garden.
Yes, that he had that in mind, and so this is what this woman represents. She represents all in the world that would seduce believers from their allegiance to Christ. And how often is that true? I can think of tremendous number of things. Young people in the church, they go away from home and don't have anybody to watch over them, and immediately they want to go to college to party. Well, this is the essence of partying. That's it. It is everything in the world that lures us away from our commitment to Christ. Now, what lures you may leave me completely untouched, but what lures me may leave you completely untouched. But it represents the sum total of that. John especially sees the human population divided into two groups. For him, the world is always the sinful world. And that's the way I translate it in the Gospel of John. That the world is all that leads to sin. Okay? And that's what this woman is. And you'll see how appropriate this is as we go. It's not an apostate religion. It's not the actual city of Babylon. There are people that say that, not many anymore that I know of, commentators, but it was quite popular at one time to say that Babylon would be rebuilt and then would be destroyed. No, these are symbols of things that were very apparent at the time John wrote this, but have always been apparent. There's always been, as somebody said, there was Satan using the lure of the eye. Good, God said it was bad, but I say it's good. And she was deceived, led astray. And so the church, God's people, let's use the correct term, God's people are always under assault. That's what you will read. It started, when the people around Shinar decided they'd build a tower to heaven. We're going to reach God in our own strength and intelligence. And we're still building towers of Babel today. when I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Now, what other vision of a woman richly dressed would come to your mind here? None of you?
Isn't there in Ezekiel, isn't there,
What if I were to say,
Jerusalem is referred to as the Greek prostitute, right? And it addresses her jewels and,
yeah, but let's
oh,
say,
I'm just thinking that, that's what came to mind.
okay, what about the woman in the 12th chapter of this book? Great and glorious. That didn't automatically come to your mind? I'm surprised. I haven't done a good job of teaching. Steve, would you mind going out there and getting me a glass of water? But that's what has led people into saying this is apostate religion, because it's so obvious that the woman there is the people of God and the church as it exists in the Christian age. So that they were led by contrast to do that. I wanted you to see that wasn't just something drawn out of the air, but they don't take into consideration the differences that you're going to see. And one of the main differences is the difference between fornication and adultery. False religion, which has God mixed up, is always thought of as adulterous. But the appeal of the world is whoredom, prostitution. The prostitute is the sign. Okay. Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up from the abyss and go to his destruction. Now that's a thumbnail history of whom? Satan. See, as God's people are separated from the world, again and again, from the time of Adam till the time of the end of time, you have the rise of this worldly seductress in whatever form. And here's where the prophetic genre of literature has a symbol. And in the Old Testament, especially in the writing prophets, the symbol is Babylon. Because a lot of Israel stayed in Babylon when the few people, the remnant, went back to Israel. You see that? Can you see that? That's the background of this. So the life in Babylon was more attractive than life. What did they say? Look, you go back there, it says the city walls are destroyed. You don't have much wealth, you don't have much anything. I'd rather stay here if you don't mind. And that's the lure of the world. It's more comfortable. It's more pleasurable. It's more a lot of things than going back to Jerusalem, going back to Israel. Thank you, Steve. Okay. The beast which is, okay. See, will come out of the abyss. It will rise up, and then its influence will be. There's been times, and among God's people, when the lure of the world faded to where it was much easier. I'm always sharing with you my insight that in this country, we have lived in a fool's paradise where the world, we could depend on, say, school teachers, secular school teachers. They would pretty well reinforce our moral and ethical teachings of Christianity. But that's only temporary. It sure isn't that way now. Nearly all the great universities in this country were established to train preachers. That's surely not that way now. You see how the influence of the world ebbs and flows. The seductiveness of the world ebbs and flows. The only problem is that when we get comfortable with one of the ebbs, we're sowing weakness when the seduction of the world becomes strong again. It's like being inoculated against a disease. Okay. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 hills on which the woman sits. Now, immediately, what city is what? Rome. I used to could name the 7 hills, but I can't anymore, so I'm not even going to try. Capitoline is one. That's where the forum was. Capitoline, Esquiline. I said I wasn't going to try. keep me on the straight and narrow.
That rabbit trail.
What?
Get off that rabbit trail.
Yes. Okay. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, but when he does come, he must remain a little while. Let's see. The other has not yet. Now, these are references to Rome that the immediate believers would understand. When it says this calls for wisdom, it means wisdom. Look around you. Recognize what I'm talking about. Because Rome was not only the persecuting power, it was the seductive power. Do you ever hear of a song that was popular during World War I? How are you going to keep them down on the farm when they've seen Gay Paris? You never heard that? Well, you have now. It was a popular song, and it represented this idea. See, you've been to Paris, the farm's not going to look very good.
I actually was thinking about that when you were describing the city and the tempestuous. And I thought of that very same song.
You did? Well, you're closer to my generation than you are to this one. But that sums up this whole idea that's here. That the woman is seductive. The beast once was and now is not, is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. Now, if I were cognizant of the history, immediate history before this book was written, that would have meaning to me. But I am not. I know quite a bit. I've read Suetonius's The 12 Caesars, Tacitus, and a lot of things, but I get mixed up about what this could be. And there's scholars that spend their time trying to find parallels between this and some of the historians of the Roman Empire. But I don't have to, because the principle is the same. That is, in my time, there are seductions from the worldly cities. Cities, after living in a small community of Albany, Texas, I once spouted off as a smart aleck and said, I know why the big cities are so wicked. The people from the small ones move to it.
About this verse, I've heard quite a few sermons, preachers, compare these kings to the Pope.
Oh yeah, and that's what I mean by seeing false religion. That it's been that way since the Reformation time, and it just doesn't fit because of the difference between adultery and prostitution. That is a biblical distinction that goes all the way back to the writing prophets in the 8th century BC. And it is a continuous literary tradition that makes that distinction. That's one thing I like about Hendricks. He lets the Bible interpret the Bible. He doesn't try to impose a philosophy of history upon it. He derives his philosophy of history from the Bible. And that's what I do. Okay. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose, and will give their power and authority to the beast. That is, worldly people will serve the beast in order to get authority. I've been reading Andre Moreau's history of the French, and the history of the French from prehistoric times until the present is almost a description of this, how they'll rise up and commit themselves to a leader, and leaders will prostitute themselves to be kings or leaders of France, and then they'll fall. And it's still that way. Just think about, we're coming up, even though it's 21 months before we elect a president, people are already jockeying for position. And I heard the man who was a political advisor for several presidents, including the present one. And his immorality shocked me, even as worldly as I am about history. His idea was, you package the man. You find out what the people want, and you cut the man to fit their wants. And that's exactly what this is talking about. They will sell out to the seduction of the world, worldly power. Got 10 kings here, and they'll rise up and then they will fall. They'll rise up and they will fall. Now, if you recognize those, remember this is a beast that we've already seen with 7 heads and 10 horns and so on. But this is from a little different perspective. But it's the same beast she's riding on. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. There's the promise of Revelation. He will overcome. Don't be afraid, for I have overcome the world. Jesus talking to his apostles. This is what the church needed at the time this was written. They were overwhelmingly in the majority. And the power they had was infinitesimal if you counted swords and men on horseback and fighting men and everything. All they had was to be faithful to their Lord, knowing the promise, for I have overcome. We need that kind of spiritual backbone in the world today. We need believers who are so committed to Christ that they're not afraid of anything. Now, that doesn't mean you ought to go out and throw yourself in front of some persecuting force, but it also means you oughtn't to go around wringing your hands and say, oh, we live in such a terrible time. The world has always been terrible. That's one of the teachings of the book of Revelation, that this goes back to the beginning, because Satan is in the world, active. Did you start?
That image is very, I guess in terms of human logic, it's very confusing, because to go to war against the Lamb, which portrays an image of peaceful and quiet and not doing anything, I would think that people who are non-believers looking at this would have a tough time, because how do you go to war against the Lamb and a Lamb defeats you?
The Lamb what?
How does the Lamb defeat you when the Lamb is a passive creature in a sense?
Okay. How did he defeat the world? What?
By dying and rising.
By dying. By sacrificing himself. And that is always in the background. Now, that's not something that we like to think about, but it is the teaching of the New Testament, however. And you know what? I don't know a single smidgen of the Roman Empire that's still in existence, do you? But I know millions of believers who are. Think about that. See, what this needs to do is reorient the way we look at our world. Because we will win. No, we won't. Christ will win, and if we belong to him, we'll be on the winning side. We won't win. And if we go to fight the battle with the enemy's weapons, we will have lost. That's one of the paradoxes of being a believer. Okay. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. Now, the worm turns. There will be a revulsion, and there always is. You can mark this down in history. If something is popular for a period of time historically, its opposite will rise up. And then it will look like Satan is defeated. See, that's that he was, but he isn't, and he will be again. That's that cyclic situation. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish His purpose by agreeing to give the beasts their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of earth. Now, lest you forget it, this is a great worldly city. Now, that's important when we come to the next section, the 18th chapter. Now, I'm going to stop here.